Hey guys, it's Anna. Welcome back to my channel. Wow, it's been a while. I've stopped making videos for many reasons, but the main reason was that I was not enjoying reading at all. I found it to be a chore and I did not like anything that I was reading. I didn't even want to pick up books, but I rediscovered my joy of reading once again, and we're gonna talk about all the books that I've read so far in 2021. So it's going to be my January and February wrap-up. Just heads up, it's going to be a long list of things. I was surprised myself. I had to make my tea because I feel like I'm gonna lose my voice, especially that I haven't recorded in so long, but also it's just a lot of books to talk about. I'm gonna try to be as concise as possible, but I do recommend you get something to drink, something to nibble on, and if you're ready to go, let's do it. So January wasn't really my strongest month, but I still managed to finish 3 books in total, and I started off the year with Conjuring of Light by V. Schwab. This is the 3rd and final installment in the Shades of Magic trilogy. I only read the first 2 last year. I think I did the dedicated book review for the first one, so I'm gonna link it up here for you guys. But this is a very beloved series, and I've heard so many people loving the whole series, but especially the 3rd book. To me, it felt a little bit flat. This is an adult fantasy series. We follow Kel and Delilah in this world where there are 4 different types of London, with different levels of magic in each one of them. In the first book, the story commences as Kel steals something or smuggles something from one of the Londons into his own Red London, and things start happening. This is not allowed, and there's a good reason why it's not allowed. What I really loved was the idea for the world and idea for the magic. It was so interesting, so unique, but what fell short for me was the actual world building, because I just wanted to know more and I wanted to learn more and just find out more details about the world and how the magic works and about everything. Just I needed more. Even though this book is massive, I didn't get much new information in it. It's the same thing as in the second book, where most of the world building happens still in the first book, and then even though it's not a lot of information and even though we progress with the plot, we don't get much more new information about the world. We get new characters, we get new plot points, but there's not much more world building, which was such a disappointment for me because it just felt so unique and so interesting that I really wanted to learn more. The characters in V. Schwab's books are always on point and they're really great. Whether it's the main characters or even some secondary characters, I really felt like these people were real, and also the writing style is so beautiful. It flows really well, you read it really quickly, but what I really wanted more from was the world building, and also the plot felt a little flat for me because going into the 3rd book, I knew what stakes there would be, I knew what depths we could expect, and it just was exactly what I thought it will be. So I didn't get this element of surprise and having my mind blown. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this series. It was still good. I think overall it was a good series, but not my favorite for sure. From then on, I picked up Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is my 2nd book by Blake Crouch. I read Dark Matter last year and really enjoyed it. I really loved the concepts and the themes explored in that book. Recursion is very similar. Recursion is all about memory and exploring the themes of mind, which are exactly the same themes that are explored in Dark Matter, I just felt like I'm reading the same book all over again. Even though Recursion was written in a different way, we have dual perspective in here from two characters' points of view, and Recursion is much more science heavy than Dark Matter was. For me, it didn't really make much of a difference, but I guess for some people who really like that science portion of science fiction, I think this one would be preferable, even though they're both very similar. But to me, it did feel like I'm reading the same story all over again, and it just didn't feel like nothing new, and I feel like I had exactly the same feelings and thoughts after finishing Recursion as Dark Matter, but it was obviously not to the same extent as finishing Dark Matter, because I've already read this and I already had these thoughts and these feelings. So I think it was a really solid book, and I feel like whichever of these two books you read first, this is gonna be your favorite. And for me, it was just Dark Matter came first, Recursion came second, so Dark Matter, Recursion. Still a good book, still would recommend it. But if you prefer little less science heavy things, go for Dark Matter. If you want more scientific things, then go for Recursion, and you're actually gonna get exactly the same thing. And then the last book that I read in January was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Honeyman. What? Gail Honeyman. This is a contemporary book that deals with mental health, anxiety, depression, and dealing with your own fears from the past, and just basically embracing the past and finding a way to move forward. We follow our main protagonist, Eleanor. She is awkward, she is hilarious in her awkwardness, and honestly, it was fun to read. Plot-wise, it's really boring in the sense that nothing really happens, because this is a classic slice of life story. You just follow Eleanor as she goes on about her day, going to work, going shopping, meeting a friend. But because it's written from Eleanor's perspective, who is awkward and who is socially distant, she is socially awkward, and the way she thinks and acts and talks in just any social situation is really funny, because she honestly says what a lot of people think but would never dare to say out loud. So some situations are really hilarious. I also really enjoy the friendship that we get in here between Eleanor and one of her colleagues. What was it? Was his name Gary? Well, it's not really important, but it's a friendship, a new friend that Eleanor makes. Actually, the only friend that she has. It's one of her new colleagues, and it was a really enjoyable friendship to read about. Even though they're both a bit weird, they found each other and they managed to make something of it. So the friendship was really nice and was really a delight to read about. However, I feel like this book is, maybe not to say overly positive or overly optimistic, but this is the words that really come to my mind when I think about it. I feel like Eleanor's recovery was really rushed and really easy and really quick, and I just don't think that it was realistic, especially that she's been struggling with these issues for years and years. So in my opinion, it just was not realistic enough. It was optimistic in a sense that yes, there is hope for anyone, and you know, as long as you do something about it, then you can get better. Not everyone gets a happy ending, and I feel like in all of these mental health books that I read, there is a happy ending, there is the recovery, and I feel like there is the happy ending, there's the quick recovery and going back to normal, and just getting better. So yes, was a positive and optimistic read, but not really very realistic, and ultimately not something that I was hoping to get from this book. Now moving on to things that I read in February. When I saw the number of things that I read, I was blown away, because that was honestly the shortest month of the year, but honestly the best reading month that I've had ever, I think, number of books read wise rather than page wise, because most of the things that I picked up were quite short, but I finished 14 things in February. That is finishing a book in 2 days, essentially. How? I don't know. Honestly, I am so happy because I am finally enjoying my reading, and it just makes me happy to pick up books and to read new stories. So here we go. The first thing that I read in February was The Umbrella Academy, Dallas. So that's volume 2. This is by Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba. Second volume in the Umbrella Academy story. In this graphic novel we follow 7 adopted children who have special powers, and they try to protect the earth and try to stop the bad guys. The first volume I enjoyed, was my favorite, but was okay. This one I really did not like at all. It's so sad to say, because I really enjoy the show. The TV show is super good, and Gerard Way, obviously he's the frontman of My Chemical Romance, and Teenage Anna is screaming right now because I did not like something that he put out, but it was just not enjoyable at all for me. I very often struggle with graphic novels, and I feel like this, what I got here, is the quintessence of why I don't pick up graphic novels or not enjoy them when I do pick them up. The story was super rushed, super nonsensical, and it was just so weird to get your head around it. We had a lot of time jumps, we had a lot of perspective jumps, and I just couldn't follow it. If I hadn't watched the second season before picking the second volume up, I probably would be like, what the hell? I honestly wouldn't have any clue. Even though the graphic novels are very different from the TV show, it still helped me to understand it. No, just no. Too nonsensical, too rushed, too little content, and it's just not for me, and I'm not gonna be continuing with reading these graphic novels. It was just really a poor experience for me. The next thing I read as an audiobook, let me just read the title because it's a long one. Prisoners of Geography, 10 Maps That Tell You Everything You Need to Know About Global Politics by Tim Marshall. It's a non-fiction about geopolitics. I am not someone who's really interested in geopolitics, not someone that really digs into it, but I just felt like reading something like that at that point in time. And even though I am not super into it, I enjoyed the content, but I also felt like most of the things that were in the book were the things that I already knew, or just something that I was aware about. So I feel like that book would be a great introduction, like super basic introduction. If someone didn't know anything about geopolitics, if they didn't follow the news or didn't read any sort of international stories or history books, then this book is an amazing introduction to geopolitics. But also, I was a little bit disappointed in the fact that the book or the author didn't really work that much with the maps. I thought it's gonna be more about the maps, and because there's 10 chapters, there are 10 different maps. Some chapters are more about the maps and more about geography, but mostly this book was about politics and the author's predictions about the future, which was okay, like it was interesting, but it was not really something that I really wanted. So I'm really a little bit torn about these. But overall, I did enjoy my time. I did learn a little bit. It was just a really quick, fun non-fiction to read. From then on, I picked up a book that's been on my shelf for the longest time. I honestly think it's been like 2.5 years or so. But it is The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. I honestly don't know how can I talk about this book. It's really short again, like look at this blank pages. You can see that I have thoughts, or I marked some passages in here, but let me try to explain the plot. First of all, you should know there is no plot in here. There is no plot in here. We follow this one guy. He's like a pensioner, so he's like in his 60s or so, and he's just reminiscing the highlights of his life. So he goes back to reminiscing his school days, and then after that his first girlfriend and his college years, and then just a little bit of like life after college. So essentially the main theme in here is memory and how people can manipulate their memories of their past selves to create a sense of self and create their new identity, if you will. I'm really interested in memory in general. I think like you will see the memory theme within this wrap-up. So I do believe that the themes explored in here were interesting, but because there was really no plot and everything was so ordinary, for a reason, like I'm sure it was meant to be this way. Everything was supposed to be really grey and really ordinary, so every person can find a piece of themselves in the story. But because of that, it was really not memorable and just didn't really stick with me. I did mark some passages and some quotes in here, but since finishing the book, I have not even gone back to check them out or read them, and the story overall fell flat for me. Even though, like I said, some observations in there were interesting, they were never explored enough for me to actually stop and think. Julian Barnes in general writes about memory. Hopefully I'll get to pick up some other of his books, but this one was not really something for me and it just didn't stick. From then, close to the Valentine's Day, just to put myself into a romantic mood, I decided to pick up a romance book, and boy was I sorry. So I saw this book on Script and I was like, it's been recommended to me on Script, and I'm like, okay fine, let me just do it, because I'm not a romance reader at all. So I was like, just whichever, I've heard about this book, so let's just do it. You Had Me at Ola by Alexis Daria. Wow, did I not like this book? This book centers around this TV show that has our two main characters, obviously starring in the same drama, in the same TV show. They both have Hispanic or Latino roots. I think the guy is maybe from Venezuela or somewhere like that. I think he's from Venezuela and she is like the daughter of a Mexican. He is a very famous telenovela actor, and she has gained her popularity starring in soap operas in the US. They meet, things happen, but honestly this book was so bad. I do appreciate the representation. I do appreciate how the author was trying to include different ethnicities and different cultures rather than just having the two white main characters. I do appreciate that, and I think it's really important to explore different cultures, but I just couldn't care less for the book. That's it. The characters were so bad, like they were poorly written. I felt like the dialogue, it's just read, I felt like the whole book read like a bad fan fiction. The dialogue was so cheesy and was just like eye-rolling cheesy, honestly. It it was not good. I just felt like even the way they were speaking, because there was a lot of Latino community in there, and the way they were speaking and just like putting in some random Spanish words into their sentences for no reason at all. I just don't feel like Spanish people or like Hispanic people speak like this, especially that I know that from experience. Like I'm surrounded by Spanish speaking people. This is not how they do it. Like when they were saying, oh, so we need to go to the shop, get some bread, get some salami, get some cheese, and some galletas, and also some olives. Why would they say galletas instead of biscuits? I just don't get it. It was just so random. Out of nowhere, they would just throw in a Spanish word because they had to prove that they're Spanish. I just don't feel it was realistic. I just don't think it was well written. It was really cringy. The romance was super cringy and just not for me at all. So I do not recommend this book. From then on, I picked up the very famous, very well known and hyped The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is an interesting one. I knew that this is written in a form of slam poetry, so it's written in verse by a contemporary. We follow this girl who is the titled Poet X. She's also Hispanic. I think her mother is from Dominicana. I think her mother is from Dominicana or thereabouts. But here we follow this girl who goes on about her life. Nothing really exciting happens in here. There's no really major plot. It's just we see her life through her poetry, which is really interesting, and I thought as a concept it was really interesting. But I just feel like, first of all, the slam poetry didn't really work for me, in the sense that for most of the time there was like many different entries. It was like a diary entry of her poetry, if you know what I mean. For most of the things, it just didn't seem like a poetry at all. I listened to it on audio, and the narrator is the author herself, so she definitely did bring a lot of emotions into her reading and into reading her story. But I just didn't feel like I was listening to poetry. Most of the time it just felt like I was listening to a story written in a standard prose, which was not something that I wanted and I was expecting from the book. So I don't know if it's just the format that didn't work for me, or perhaps that the whole story and the whole book is really hyped up. I think it was an important story, but I just wasn't as moved as everybody thought that they were. And maybe it's the format, maybe it's just the wrong timing of reading it. Maybe if I was younger, then it would hit me more. But yeah, this is a coming of age story written in slam poetry. It was good, it was enjoyable, but not what I was expecting ultimately. From then on, I picked up an amazing book. It's actually very short, but it's amazing, and it's Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Choo Nam-ju, and this is a Korean fiction. Well, fiction, it is fiction. It's literary fiction, but based on real world events, real life events. And I know specifically, I know that this book is not gonna be for everybody, but it was something that really hit me in my feels, and it honestly, even if I think about it, I get goosebumps. So this is how you know the book was good. But this book is about our title character, Kim Ji-young. She was born in 1982, and there's nothing really ordinary about her. Again, slice of life. We see her grow up from a very young age, through her school years, through her marriage and work, and the book just details her experiences as a woman living in South Korea. It's a very hard book to read, especially if you're a woman, because to some extent, even if you don't live in South Korea, as long as you're a woman, you have experienced some of the things. You've experienced the discrimination, you've experienced the inequality, and here we just find out a regular woman's story, a regular woman's life, and the hardships that she has to go through purely because she's a woman. And it was really heartbreaking. It was very emotional. At the end of the book, I was honestly crying tears of sympathy and tears of understanding. It was the first book in a long time that made me cry, actually. And I know this book is not going to be for everybody. I know that this is not something that everybody will enjoy, and especially that not much happens plot-wise in here. So not everybody will enjoy it. But I think it's such an important book overall. The things that are explored in the story are really, really important, and definitely if you're interested in feminism, I did some background research, and this book was, when it was released 2019 or 2020 in South Korea, was considered a very feminist book. And if you're interested in feminist fiction, then definitely you have to pick this one up. So important, such an important subject to know about and to discuss. And it was just something that really made me feel all the emotions. And yeah, and the last line of the book, really hard-hitting. Then I listened to another audiobook, another book about memory, which was Still Alice by Lisa Genova. This is a contemporary book about a woman who finds out she has Alzheimer's disease. She's in her early 50s, and she started to lose her memory, or she started forgetting things, which is obviously extremely early for an Alzheimer's disease. And it was a very heartbreaking story. This story is told from the perspective of the woman who is losing her memory, who has the Alzheimer's disease. When we meet her, she's a great Harvard professor, and throughout the story we just see her descent and losing her touch with herself, and it's just horrible, honestly. This story just shows how an absolutely ruthless and terrifying disease Alzheimer's is, and especially shown from the perspective of the person losing her memory and losing herself. We're kind of left with the thoughts of what actually makes a human being. Is it the memories? Is it the mind? Or is it something else? And it was really difficult to read, and a very interesting and very important story as well. I really liked it. I was not the biggest fan of the very ending of the story, but I felt like perhaps the way it finished and the way it wrapped up was more realistic and more probable in her situation. So yeah, definitely very heartbreaking, very difficult read, but so important and really, really great. I actually really want to watch the movie as well with Julianne Moore because she won an Oscar for it, and I can see how she can bring the story even more to life on a big screen. So really looking forward to watching the movie as well. But still, Alice is still a really great book, really worth your time. Then I read something that I was not expecting I'm gonna read, but Netflix made me do it. And it was the whole trilogy of the Shadow and Bone. What is it? The Grishaverse trilogy, the first Grishaverse trilogy. So probably everybody knows that already, but the Shadow and Bone series will be released in April, and I just had to read the books before watching the show because this is the person I am. So yeah, I read all three in a span of like a week, maybe 9 days. I was really apprehensive picking this one up because I had so many mixed reviews, especially that these books came out, I think the first one in 2011 or 12, so they're pretty old now, and some of the themes that are explored here, I can see that they're a bit dated, and some of the tropes that we see here we've seen in many more books and series since then. But you have to keep this in mind, that these are probably one of the original YA fantasy series, and that back then these tropes were not as popular, so they were not as predictable back in the day. It's just with experience we what is this sound? Excuse me. But yeah, readers getting more experience and reading more books, obviously going back to some older titles like these, obviously the tropes are gonna be there. But quickly, what this trilogy is about. It's set in a world, it's a fantasy, YA fantasy, set in a world based around the 18th century Russia. There's magic. The people who can or have magic in them are called Grishas, and they're obviously people who don't have magic and they're just regular people, lowborns, let's say. But Grishas can be anybody. It can be from lowborns to royals. It can be literally anybody. And we have our OTP bad guy, the Darkling, who everybody loves. I was really indifferent towards. But yeah, we have Darkling, who is our bad guy who wants to destroy the world, even though he trusts that he's doing the right thing, that he's actually helping people. But what he's planning to do is going to destroy the kingdom that we are in. So obviously our plain Jane Alina, who magically discovers that she is a Grisha, is coming to help the realm of men. Hey. Plot-wise, I feel like the first book was the most interesting because something's happening, at least. In the second book, is just loads of nonsense. Like, this is 300 pages or 400 pages of nothing happening, and in the third one again it picks up, but still I feel like it's really rushed in the third one. The magic is really interesting and the world is really interesting, and I just really wanted to know more. In the first book, Alina goes to this like Grisha academy and she learns about the past and the history of Grishas, how it all started, what magics they had, blah 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 blah. And we see her reading the books History of Grisha or History of whatever, I don't know. We see her learning and we see her reading these books, but none of this information is passed on to us. I ask why? What's the point of creating a whole new world and whole new universe just and not letting the readers know the history and how it all originated. It gets better in book 2 and 3. We get more information, especially in book 3, or I don't know. I literally read them one after the other, so I don't really remember. I don't distinguish them that much. I don't really remember what happens in which specific book. But yeah, I remember that it got better and we got more information, so that is good. Tropes. You get the plain Jane trope, you get the very ordinary girl that suddenly all guys fall for, and you got the OTP bad guy who is also really hot and she can't resist, and you know, it's just trope after trope after trope, and it's fun. You can't really expect to be surprised with so many tropes in there, but it was still quite an enjoyable experience overall. I had so much fun reading these books, even though, like I said, there was some things that I didn't enjoy and that I wish there was more of. I still feel like it was an okay series, and I just don't understand why so many people are hating on it nowadays, especially. But yeah, so I finished the first Grisha trilogy. On to Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom I go. I actually ordered them already, so I am looking forward to diving right back into this universe, into this world again. Also, after picking up The Poet X, I decided that I really want to try to read some poetry, or slam poetry, whatever you call that, because I just want to find out if poetry is for me, or it's just something that I will never understand and will never hit me. So I decided that I'm gonna read some poetry collections throughout the year, and then I can finally once and for all decide if this is for me or if it's not for me. So without more strolling, I picked up Stuff I've Been Feeling Lately by Alicia Cook. I think the main theme is music in a way. It's her experiences, her everyday life experiences and her feelings, but also paired with music, because each poem has a song that connects to the poem or to the feelings that she's describing, which I thought was extremely cool, and this is why I picked it up. But then I read the poetry, and to me most of them just felt like diary entries. It didn't feel like poetry. I don't know if it's just me, but it just really felt like sometimes it had like full sentences, and to me it just didn't feel very poetry-like. Maybe I'm completely off. Maybe this is slum poetry, this is modern poetry, I have no idea. But as I said in my Goodreads review, I don't know at all how to score this one. It didn't make me feel anything, which I think is bad. But it could be just because this is not a form that I will be okay with, that my brain just works with. Don't think I recommend it because I didn't feel anything, but I will let you know more about this in later video, like later at the end of the year, because I can't tell you much more now. I also read Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is classified as science fiction, but it's basically contemporary with a tiny science fiction twist or aspect to it, but it's not really science fiction. Most of the things happen in like a real world. We follow this group of people, 3 friends that go to this school, and I think they're all orphans, or at least we don't know their families. They don't know their families. They've been in that school forever and they don't remember anything before. I don't want to say too much because then it's gonna be spoiler, but the reason why they're there is because they have one big purpose in life, which is insert the science fiction twist. But I think what we're supposed to get from this book is what makes human a human, what makes you you, what creates you, and what you can do to establish your identity. I think this is what we're supposed to get from it. What I got is 300 pages of boredom, 300 pages of horrible characters, and worst of all, I really couldn't connect with the author's writing style. The way he writes this story is, the main character is talking about something that's happening right now, but then she suddenly remembers, but in order to understand this story, you have to go back and let me tell you this other story about something else that happened in the past, and then not going back to the actual story later, and then just going on and on and on and on about the thing that happened in the past, and then we go back to the present time, and it's like literally a page or a page and a half of meaningless story with every single thing that happens in this book. This is the way he describes the story. I couldn't connect with it. It was really annoying because it was just time jumps, and then you would forget about what the purpose of this anecdote was, and it's just horrible. Couldn't connect with it, couldn't really get through it. I had to listen to it on audiobook because otherwise I was just not following and not reading at all. I didn't want to read this book. The characters were terrible. Ruth was horrible friend. I don't know, she was just the worst, and our main character just let her be the worst, and she would take all the blame for everything. And terrible person. Ruth is the definition of gaslighting. No. I understand what I was supposed to take from this book. I understand the conversations that it was supposed to start, but I cannot recommend the book. I just didn't like it. Guys, the last two books, really quickly. The first one is The Beloved, The Boy, the Horse, the Mole, the Fox. What? The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, and it is by Harley Mackesy, British author. So this is this children's storybook. I don't know what it is. It's it has story, but it also has a lot of artwork and graphics and illustrations in it. It's meant for children, and I saw so many adults reading it to their children and actually loving it. I just don't understand it. I do think the book is beautiful in the sense that the illustrations, the graphics in it, they're beautiful. It's basically life lessons for children, and there's no plot whatsoever. It's literally a sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences of life lessons on each page. Okay, for young children, I think this is an amazing thing. Honestly, I do think it's an amazing thing. For a person like me, even though I like this kind of stuff. I like this kind of stuff. On Instagram, you see so many positive quotes or life-changing quotes, and I feel like any of these life-changing quotes could be easily be swapped with the quotes from the book, and it wouldn't make any difference. It's literally a collection of sentences that are supposed to be your guideline for life. And I think for children, it's an amazing thing, and I wish this book was written and I had read it when I was a child growing up. But for me, now, it didn't do anything. It's so heartbreaking to say that it didn't do anything. It didn't impact me in any specific way because these quotes were so irrelevant to the story, or there was no story. It was supposed to be a story with life lessons in it, but this is actually just life lessons listed with some very beautiful illustrations that were added to the story. I'm not gonna tell you not to read it because so many people have read it and so many people loved it, and So yeah, go and check it out if you want to, if this is something that you would consider yourself enjoying. But to me, it felt like a very diluted version of Winnie the Pooh in a sense, because in Winnie the Pooh you do have the illustrations, you do have these life lessons, but also you have the story, and you also have these amazing characters and amazing adventures that they go on. Here you don't have that. Do not recommend, but also do not recommend. Is that even grammatically correct? I don't know. Finally, the last thing that I read in February was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Another children's middle grade book. This one is following Coraline, who has a vivid imagination. This is a kind of an introduction to horror for middle grade, so obviously it's not very scary, but it's kind of creepy, and I feel like if I've read it as an 8-9-year-old child, I would have been freaked out. It's basically a story about Coraline, who one day goes through this doorway into an alternate world, and everything is a bit off in there, and everything is a little bit creepy in there. It's kind of a creepy version of Alice in Wonderland, if you will. When I was reading it physically, I mean, I read it as an ebook, but when I was reading it, I didn't care for the story at all. I didn't find it freaky or creepy at all. I was like literally just going through it, because you go through it really fast, but I was just literally going through it. And then at some point I was like, I was doing some chores or whatever, and I switched to an audiobook, and the audiobook has some instrumental music playing alongside the narration, and also there's some sounds, and this was pretty creepy, honestly. I was like, oh, I don't want to read this after dark. So I do recommend listening to the audiobook. I know that there's an animation made of Coraline, but I feel like the book has been brought to life by the addition of music and sounds and the audio and the narration in general, and I feel like the story can benefit even more by being turned into an animation and having the visuals as well. So I know that a lot of people said that actually the animation is better than the book. I haven't seen it, so can't say, but I see why it would be the case, and I think I really want to watch it now to compare the two. But yeah, I feel like it could be a good introduction to like kind of spooky, creepy things for children, like 8-9 years old, during Halloween perhaps. It would be something that they would enjoy, I think. For adults, not so much. Wow, we've made it. We've made it to the very end. Oh my god, my voice is gone. I don't know how I managed to read so much in the past 2 months. But I'm not complaining. It's been great. I'm really in love with reading again, and it's just the best feeling in the world, being able to dive into the story and wanting to pick up more stories. Even though a lot of the things that I read so far this year I haven't enjoyed as much as I would, there were some stories that would really stick with me, and I hope the rest of the year is gonna be just as good as the first 2 months. But let me know what you guys read in the first 2 months of 2021. Let me know the best things that you read and also the worst things that you've read. I would very much like to know, and I would like to continue chatting about these books down below in the comments. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel for some more bookish and also, spoiler alert, not bookish content. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye!